Hey, what's going on, guys? gdoggcasey here, and this is a very exciting episode because this is going to be episode 1 of our healing series. And basically, it's going to be very similar to how the tanking series has gone, except this time, right from the start, I'm not going to be calling it a guide. Even though, as I've said a few times, you can take it as a guide. If you are trying to learn how to heal, you're definitely going to learn some things from me here, but I'm not the expert healer who is going to be able to tell you, exactly the proper thing to do in every single situation. This is basically like a let's play of me just going through all of the dungeons as a healer this time. And again, I'm going to be explaining, especially in the first early dungeons, I'm going to be explaining sort of my style of play, what I like to do, the pros and cons to it, and, that sort of thing. And I tend to have, it doesn't feel like to me that it should be, like a controversial style of play for a healer, but apparently it is, because sometimes when I'm healing, I'll get people who are mad at me for the way that I play, even though we're getting through it fine. Now, the one thing I will say is the way that I play tends to be the more difficult style, but I also think it helps the party more. And I'm going to talk about all of that as we go through the first dungeon, which is going to be Sastasha, which it's good to be back in Sastasha. Let's go ahead and queue up. We'll see if we get that instant queue, which we do, so we'll be able to jump right into it, and that means less editing for me, so I'm always happy about that. I'm excited to get this started here because it's going to bring some diversity to the channel. Because before, all you're seeing is tanking and the let's play for the dragoon. But this time we're going to be doing some healing, and it's going to be fun. And Sastasha is as good a place as any to get started doing dungeons. It's very, very easy. It's almost impossible to screw up. So it's going to give me a lot of time to sort of explain how I'm going to be handling this going forward. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is if you have cross-class skills, if you move Protect into slot 1, it's going to take 30 seconds before you can cast it, but you'll be able to cast Protect on the party. And, oh wow, all of my spells are on cooldown now. I wasn't expecting that. So I'm actually not able to do anything here. So this is fun, but you might want to set this up before you actually jump into the dungeon. That would be much better, as opposed to doing it the way I did it, where now I am unable to do anything for a little while. But as you can see, it doesn't even matter, because it's so easy early on that it doesn't matter. So I'm going to wait till we get into this fight, and I'm going to cast Protect on everyone. So here we go, protecting, and then I'm going to go back to my cross-class skills, and I'm going to move Cleric Stance back. Cannot do it during combat. That's okay. So we'll go ahead and heal here for now. I'm going to move Cleric Stance back where it goes, though. It's green. Okay, so Claire went and checked. We'll wait for this combat to finish, and we'll move Cleric Stance back. This is something I should have done beforehand, so I apologize. So now my skills are going to be on cooldown again. But I'll be able to start explaining my style of play as soon as we, as soon as we can get going. Now, I am of the mind that a healer can do damage in these dungeons. Now, the further we get, there are going to be dungeons. It's eventually going to get hard enough to where we really shouldn't be doing any damage, but early on, you definitely have the tools. You can see right now, if I wasn't on cooldown here, I would definitely be able to be doing damage because obviously my tank here is tanky enough to handle the damage coming in. So here we go. Imagine this is the beginning of the dungeon now. We're going to turn on our Cleric Stance, and this is sort of the first thing that healers are going to want to know how to use, is Cleric Stance. It's a little bit tough if you're not used to it. Think of it as a switch for damage and healing. So when Cleric Stance is on, that means our damage switch is on. And we can go ahead and pop an arrow on each different enemy, and then just start using our spell Malefic here for the Astrologian to do damage. And basically, I'm going to keep doing damage until the tank gets to about half health. In this case, I'm going to wait until after the fight, like right about now, turn off Cleric Stance, select the tank, and then heal. Or her in this case, I think. And then it's just going to be rinse and repeat. And dungeons like Sastasha are perfect for practicing this, because it does get a little bit confusing if you're not used to doing it you know, on an everyday basis. These things are basically like one-hit kills for us here. The tank knows what he's doing. He's gonna go ahead and take out that clam. And it, you know, this whole thing brings an interesting topic up, because when I first started the tanking series, you know, a lot of the times I said things like, all you need to worry about is taking damage. Like, just make sure you're tanking, that's your only job. And the DPS only job is to do damage, and, you know, I actually didn't say this about the healer, but it's sort of implying that the healer's only job is to heal. But I don't believe that anymore. Now I feel as though there are always different ways that you can help your team, no matter what class you are. You know, it's a little bit limited in early dungeons because it's so simple that, you know, you really don't have to be worrying about too much. But this is a good example of being a healer who can do damage and heal. Because if all you're doing is healing, then you're just standing there doing nothing most of the time, right? And you might as well put your skills to use. So we're going to turn Cleric Stance on. We're going to put Arrow on, and we're going to, or Combust, sorry. I call it Arrow. It's actually Combust for the Astrologian, but it's basically the same thing. And we're going to, where is, I can't target this. Okay, there we go. And we're keeping an eye on the tank's health. Another thing you can do is actually select the tank here, right-click, and go Focus Target. So you can just easily click here to select your tank and throw a heal on. Now, just because you have Cleric Stance on, it does not mean that you cannot heal. Like, if I wanted to heal, I could. My heals are going to be much weaker. And early in the dungeons, you might not notice the difference. You might be like, oh, whatever. I mean, you might as well keep Cleric Stance on the whole time because your dungeon, your heals are going to be still strong enough to heal. But I would urge you not to do that because it's just going to set up bad habits. You know, yeah, you can get away with it early on, but you know, it's going to be harder to not do that later on in your career as a healer when, you know, it actually, you'll start to notice. Like, I'll have fights where I'm trying to heal the tank and I'm like, what the hell, I am, you know, having a really hard time. So the tank's getting a little bit low here. We're going to go ahead and start healing. I remove Cleric Stance. It's going to take maybe 3 heals. Get her back up to full health. Put Cleric Stance back on and continue doing damage. You know, we're helping our team in every aspect we can. Now, I think for this dungeon, I'm going to focus a little bit more on just your actual playstyle rather than, you know, how you can use your skills as an Astrologian. Apparently I pulled that. Probably my heal triggered, or I don't know, I wasn't even healing, so I'm not sure what happened there, but whatever. You know, there's a lot of different skills that the Astrologian gets, but because this is sort of like the beginner episode number 1, we don't have a lot of skills available anyway. You know, I'm thinking I'm going to save that explanation for the next dungeon, because then, you know, I've already done my spiel on Cleric Stance and what they call stance dancing, which I think is a very important thing to keep in mind when you're a healer. Now, that said, if you want, like, there are people who disagree with me. There are people who think that the healer should just be the healer. And you know what? I mean, the tank is not going to die half as much if you do go by that philosophy. But I think you're missing out on an opportunity to help the party. Like, during this boss fight, I have not healed once. The tank is doing fine. We're not even going to have to heal once during this whole fight. And lucky for us, we do have our AoE heal available to us even in the first dungeon, so we can just throw, even though we have Cleric Stance on, we can still do that. I just mentioned that I recommend you not do that, so, you know, I shouldn't have done it, but, you know, you can take Cleric Stance off and do the heal. It's just gonna prepare you for later on when it's very important that you do not have Cleric Stance on while you are healing. And we'll see, because I will make some mistakes. I mentioned before, I'm not really the boss healer. I'm not as good at healing as I am at tanking, so... But again, removing Cleric Stance, gonna get a couple heals off, gonna put Cleric Stance back on, and gonna get back to damaging. I have 2 damaging skills. I have Combust and I have Malefic, so that's all you really have to worry about. And we're all good on this one. So another thing, remember that trick at the beginning? You want to enter the dungeon when you have Protect as your main cross-class skill, and then after you cast Protect on everyone, then you can go ahead and use switch over Cleric Stance so that you can actually be useful. Because if you don't have Cleric Stance, your damage is just going to be awful. And just for a bit of an explanation on what Cleric Stance does, it switches your intellect and mind attributes around. So like I said, it's like a switch, right? So I turn off the switch so that I can heal. Because now my mind stat is at its highest, and then I put Cleric Stance back on, and now my intelligence is the highest. So you use your intelligence when you're doing damage, and you use your mind when you're healing. And there we go. We do not need any of this loot. And we're going to keep going. Our bard doesn't have Protect, but it's not a big deal. I'm not going to take a 30-second cooldown just to give her Protect, and she's not even probably going to get hit at all this entire dungeon, so. Like what this tank is doing with the marking. It's kind of funny because, again, in my tanking series, I sort of emphasized how much I like marking and how important I think it is. I still think it's important, and I still do it most of the time, but I'm a little bit less serious about it now. I still recommend doing it, and you'll see me in my tanking guides, I'll still do it. But there's going to be more instances where I don't do it anymore, just because it's relatively simple to figure out who they are attacking by just looking at the health bars. But I'm never going to get mad at a tank for marking, that's for sure. Alright. So once again, this dungeon involves us mostly just doing damage and just healing when it's required. I'm still using the same tactics to swap between targets, just using tab when needed to switch to a different target. Unfortunately, there's no sort of tab option for your own party members, at least that I can think of. I did a little bit of looking around in the hotkey section, and I found some that seemed like they should be sort of like that, but it didn't actually work that way. So if you guys know any way where you can sort of set up a toggle system for your own party member so that you can heal and like hit tab to select a different party member instead of a different enemy, let me know, because I would love to know about that. Unfortunately, at the moment, I don't think it's a possibility. So we're going to take off Cleric Stance. We're going to drop a heal on Mrs. Benny Blades here. I think that's a Mrs., isn't it? Oh, maybe it's a... I don't know. I thought it was a female, but maybe it is a male. I have no idea. Alright, put Cleric Stance back on, and we're going to fight this sort of mini-boss dude. Always keeping an eye on your tank's health. Usually it's about halfway, but you'll start to gauge when the tank actually needs to heal. This tank is doing a good job. He's got relatively decent gear, at least I think so. Yeah, I mean, like, it's all level 35 stuff, so obviously he's over-geared for this dungeon, so he's going to be fine. So you'll notice he actually does have more hit points than us and everything like that. Sometimes you'll come into these dungeons and you'll have a tank that is lower, that is not geared at all. And you will notice that they're taking, like, heavy damage right off the bat. If that's the case, you will not be able to do as much damage as I'm doing right now. And no doubt we'll end up going through a dungeon where we end up with a tank like that that's a little bit lower geared, and we'll have to face that situation. Because no matter what class you play, although definitely to a lesser extent DPS, if you're playing DPS, most of the time you can just kind of focus on yourself and you know, you'll be alright. But there might still be situations where you have to be aware of what your teammates are doing. But when you're a tank and when you're a healer, you really need to be aware of what your teammates are doing and assess the situation based on that. Especially if you're trying to do damage, you want to be able to help your team as much as possible. You need to make sure that you're not neglecting healing the tank as well. Because the tank, like I mentioned, you'll come in here and you'll get a tank that has half the hit points as this guy's got, and he doesn't know how to flash, and he doesn't know how to hold threat. And, you know, at that point, it's up to the healer to carry the party. Usually a tank can single-handedly carry the party, but when the tank fails, the healer has to pick it up. you're gonna notice that you'll get a tank that does not know how to hold threat. Whoops, forgot to put Cleric Stance back on there for damage. You'll get a tank that is still learning, you know, doesn't know how to hold threat, doesn't really know how to use his abilities, his or her abilities, and at that point it's going to be on you as the healer to make sure that you are making sure nobody dies. And in these early dungeons, it's definitely possible. If the, you know, Lancer all of a sudden starts tanking, you just gotta drop mad heals on the Lancer and you should be okay. There are abilities you can use, so I've turned off. I'm going to do a little bit of healing here because there's a few more enemies. But now I'm going to put Cleric Stance back on, and I'm just going to start dropping Combust on, like, everything. And we'll be fine. There are some abilities that you can use that if you pull threat because you're healing too hard, you will be able to, you know, lower your threat and things like that. And that's all stuff that we're going to talk about in the next episode. This is really just getting the basics of Cleric Stance, because there's no better dungeon than Sastasha to learn how to use Cleric Stance properly. I feel like I've said that a few times right now, but it's important because, oh, look at this. So, okay, so the tank is doing a bigger pull here. We're going to drop off Cleric Stance. We're going to start healing. And this is totally fine. And we did pull a bit of threat, so we're going to use our spell, Luminiferous Aether is the spell that you can use, which helps you regain mana and also lowers your threat. So it'll just help the tank get threat back. I'm going to drop a bit of a heal on myself, and then I'm going to go back to healing the tank. We also have an ability here called Essential Dignity, which is on a bit of a longer cooldown, but it gives a very powerful heal. So I'll show you it in action here. I'm going to let Benny take some extra damage here, maybe scare him a little bit. Okay, but then I'm going to use the Essential Dignity, boom, all the way up almost. So, and there's no cast time, it's an instant cast time. So something that you can do in certain situations, like let's say in a harder dungeon, and you'll definitely see me do this later on, you know, you can do a normal heal and then drop the Essential Dignity on the tank right after, and it's like a triple heal all in one shot, basically, and it's very good. You're going to use it to get out of a lot of trouble, especially if you play with my playstyle where you like to do damage, you know? Because the one thing that comes with this playstyle is an increased chance to mess up. So right here, Essential Dignity's on cooldown, so I can't really do it, but you know, you have an increased chance to mess up. If you're just sort of in the zone, you're tunnel visioning a little bit, and you're only doing damage, and you're not really noticing your tank is taking hits, abilities like this are going to get you out of hot water. But if you're not attentive enough, you will find that you might let your tank die. And that's when the tank is going to jump on you and going to be like, oh, you're spending too much time doing damage. You know, you really should be only healing, or at least be doing a better job healing. And that's when you need to just pay a little bit more attention. It sounds like a basic thing, but sometimes healing can get a little bit easy, and you can fall into a bit of a crutch where you are, you know, you're just not really paying attention to things, and next thing you know, your tank is so low that you need a miracle to heal him. It looks like we're going to be zerging this boss down here. We're not going to... Oh, no, they're going to go for the mechanics. Okay, in that case, then I will as well. You can complete this boss by just ignoring the unnatural ripples. I'm going to go back to doing damage here. It looks like we're... I don't know. We're a bit split here on whether or not we want to do that. I'm going to go ahead and just grab these, just so I can say I did my job. I'm too far away. Alright, tank is getting low. I'm going to drop off Cleric Stance. I'm going to do a heal, and then followed immediately by Essential Dignity, and boom, full health. See that? And we killed the boss. So, you know, there's a lot more to healing than what I was able to explain in this initial video, and the hope of this series is that in every video I'll be able to show you something new, and you know, you'll get to learn something. But at the same time, maybe you're a better healer than me. Maybe I'm giving misinformation, you know, maybe I'm saying something that you don't agree with. If that's the case, definitely let me know in the comments. You know, I'm not trying to have like nasty arguments with people, but I definitely love talking about different things that you can do in this game, like, you know, based on whether or not you want to be... Oh, that was cool. That was really cool. I don't even know what that was. Huh. We got a player commendation. yeah, like, you know, you might have a different playstyle, and I love talking about the different things that you can do in this game, and, you know, be successful whether or not you follow one playstyle or another. That being said, I feel like I left out a lot. You know, it's a little bit different talking about healing than it was talking about tanking. So, you know, let me know what you guys think in the comments. I definitely plan on doing much more healing. We're going to go through all the dungeons just like we're doing with the tank. So, you know, we'll eventually get to cover everything. But that one, we just flew right through it. So it almost feels like no time at all. So, you know, we'll have to cover more things in the following episodes, but I'm excited to get this one up and off the ground and into YouTube so that I can hear what you guys want to say about it. And that's it. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.